Before we get into today's video, I need every Fever fan and WNBA fan watching right now to do 3 things. First, smash the like button because this story is going to spark some serious debate. Second, subscribe to the channel if you love in-depth WNBA coverage, Caitlin Clark news, Indiana Fever analysis, and the biggest stories happening across women's basketball. And third, drop a comment below and tell me this: who do you think is most responsible for Indiana's offensive struggles right now? Caitlin Clark, Stephanie White, the supporting cast, or is it simply a team chemistry issue? I want to hear your thoughts because by the end of this video, you're probably going to have a strong... Now let's talk about the shocking reality nobody saw coming. The Indiana Fever were supposed to be one of the most dangerous offensive teams in the WNBA this season. They have Caitlin Clark, one of the greatest playmakers the sport has ever seen. They have Aliyah Boston, a dominant force in the paint. They have Kelsey Mitchell, one of the league's most explosive scorers. On paper, this team should be lighting up scoreboards every single night and overwhelming opponents with offensive firepower. But that's happening. In fact, the exact opposite is happening. The numbers are becoming impossible to ignore, and the criticism is growing louder with every game. The Fever aren't just struggling offensively compared to preseason expectations. They're struggling compared to virtually every other playoff contender in the WNBA. For a team with championship aspirations, that's a massive problem. What's making this story even more unbelievable is that Indiana's offense was supposed to be their greatest strength. Instead, it has become their biggest weakness. Possessions are breaking down. Scoring droughts are becoming routine. Defenses seem to have figured out ways to disrupt the Fever's rhythm. And suddenly, a team many expected to challenge for a championship is searching for the biggest question now is, how did we get here? How does a team loaded with offensive talent end up producing some of the most frustrating offensive performances among playoff contenders? Is it coaching? Is it execution? Is it roster construction? Is Caitlin Clark being asked to carry too much of the burden? Or is there something much bigger happening behind the scenes that fans aren't talking about? Today we're breaking down everything. The numbers. The eye test. The coaching decisions. The player performances. The growing concerns surrounding Indiana's offense. And most importantly, whether this is a temporary slump or a warning sign that could derail the Fever's championship. Trust me, some of these statistics are going to surprise you. So what we're about to dive into may completely change how you view the Indiana Fever season. The Indiana Fever were supposed to be here by now. Not just in the playoff picture. Not just competing for wins. Not just attracting national attention every time they stepped onto the court. They were supposed to be one of the most feared teams in the WNBA. When the season began, the expectations surrounding the Fever were unlike anything the franchise had experienced in years. The combination of Caitlin Clark's superstar talent, Aliyah Boston's continued growth into one of the league's premier bigs, and Kelsey Mitchell's proven scoring ability created the belief that Indiana was ready to make a serious championship. For months, fans imagined what this offense could become. An unstoppable attack led by the greatest passer in women's basketball. A fast-paced system capable of overwhelming opponents. A team that could score from anywhere on the floor. A team that would force defenses into impossible decisions. But some season predictions and the reality of the regular season, something unexpected happened. The offense stopped looking ill. Then it stopped looking. And now, for long stretches of games, it looks downright broke. That's the reality facing Indiana today. And it's becoming impossible to. What's especially surprising is that the Fever aren't struggling because they lack talent. This isn't a rebuilding roster. This isn't a team full of inexperienced players trying to figure things out. This is a roster loaded with players who have already proven they can perform at the highest. Yet night after night, the offense continues to fall short of expectations. Problems don't always show up immediately. Many Fever games start exactly the way fans hope they will. The ball moves. Players run the floor. Clark finds open teammates. Boston establishes position inside. Mitchell attacks the defense aggressively. Every working. Then suddenly the rhythm disappears. A few empty possessions become 5. 5 become 8. The pace slows down. The movement stops. And before anyone realizes what's happening, Indiana finds itself trapped in another scoring drought. Those droughts have become one of the defining themes of the frustrating part is that they often arrive without one moment the Fever look like contenders. The next they look like a team searching desperately for answers. For fans, that inconsistency has become exhausting. Because this team can be. They've seen the stretches where Indiana looks nearly. They've watched Clark orchestrate an offense that seems impossible to stop. They've watched Boston dominate both ends of the floor. They've watched Mitchell catch fire and score at will. Those moments prove the potential. The problem is that those moments don't last long enough. And in professional basketball, potential doesn't win championships. Consistency does. When analysts discuss Indiana's offensive struggles, the conversation almost always starts with Caitlin Clark. That's understandable. Clark is the face of the franchise. She's the player opponents build entire defensive game plans around. She's the player every arena comes to see. She's the player who receives the most praise when things go well and the most criticism when they don't. But blaming Clark for the Fever's offensive problems oversimplifies a much more complicated situation. In many ways, Clark is being asked to do everything. She's expected to create shots for herself. She's expected to create shots for teammates. She's expected to push the pace. She's expected to handle defensive pressure. She's expected to lead. And she's expected to do all of it while facing some of the toughest defensive attention in the league. Every opponent understands the same basic reality. If Caitlin Clark gets comfortable, Indiana becomes dangerous. So defenses are determined to prevent that from happening. They pick her up early. They force the ball out of her hands. They challenge they contest every shot. And while Clark has found ways to remain productive despite those challenges, the pressure eventually affects the entire offense. When the primary creator is constantly under attack, everyone else must respond. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. That's where the Fever's issues begin to multiply. Basketball is often described as a game of reaction. One player makes a move. The defense responds. Another player reacts to the defense. The chain continues. The best offenses execute those reactions almost instinctively. Players move without hesitation. Cuts happen naturally. Screens arrive at the perfect moment. The ball finds the open player. Everything flows. The Fever have shown glimpses of that level of execution. But only glimpses. Too often, possessions become static. Players stop moving. The ball sticks. Decision-making slows. Defenses recover. Opportunities disappear. And suddenly, what would have been a quality offensive possession ends with a difficult shot attempt. Those possessions add up over the course of a game. Then over the course of a season. Eventually they become a pattern. And patterns create reputation. Right now, Indiana is developing a reputation as a team that struggles offensively against elite competition. Whether that reputation is fair or not, it's becoming increasingly difficult to argue against. Another challenge facing the Fever is the weight of expectation. Expectations can be powerful. They can motivate. They can energize organizations. They can create belief. But they can also create. And pressure changes every missed shot feels bigger. Every turnover feels more. Every loss feels more significant. Indiana entered the season carrying enormous expectations. Many analysts predicted the Fever would compete near the top of the standing. Some projected them as championship contenders. Others viewed them as one of the most exciting teams in basketball. The players heard those predictions. The coaches heard those predictions. The fans certainly heard those predictions. Now reality is colliding with those expectations. And the result has been frustration. Not because Indiana is a bad team, but because they're not performing at the level many believed they would. That's an important distinction. There's a difference between disappointment. The Fever have been disappointing relative to expectation. That doesn't mean they've failed. In fact, there are plenty of reasons for optimism. Aliyah Boston continues. Her offensive game has become more versatile. She's becoming more comfortable creating opportunities for teammates. She's developing into one of the league's most complete players. Kelsey Mitchell remains one of the most dangerous scorers in basketball. When she gets hot, she can change games almost instantly. Very few players possess her ability to create offense. It shows signs of growth as well. Several role players have stepped up during important moments. The effort level remains strong. Strong. Nobody inside the organization appears ready to panic. That's significant. Because despite all the criticism surrounding Indiana's offense, the season remains far from over. The standings are the playoff race is still evolving. Teams across the league continue dealing with injuries, roster changes, and performance fluctuation. The Fever still have time to find their identity. And perhaps that's the most important point of all. Identity. Championship teams know exactly who they are. They understand their strengths. They understand their weaknesses. They understand how they want to play. Indiana appears caught between multiple identities. Some nights they want to, other nights they slow down. Some possessions emphasize ball movement, others rely on isolation score. The lack of consistency creates confusion, not just for fans, not just for analysts, potentially for the players themselves. The challenge moving forward is establishing clarity. What does the Fever offense look like at its best? How can they create that version of themselves more consistently? How can they maximize Clark's playmaking while reducing the burden she carries? Easier opportunities for Boston. How can they ensure Mitchell receives quality scoring chances? Those are the questions that will define the rest of the season. The good news is that none of these problems are impossible to solve. In fact, many successful teams have experienced similar struggles before making deep playoff runs. Chemistry often takes time. Trust takes time. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs occur after periods of frustration. Perhaps that's what Indiana is experiencing right now. Perhaps these struggles are part of a larger growth process. Perhaps the team is learning lessons that will eventually make them stronger. Or perhaps the offensive concerns are more serious than many realize. Surrounding the Fever. Which version of this team will emerge? Will it be the explosive contender fans expect? Or will offensive inconsistency continue limiting their potential? The answer may determine everything. Because in the WNBA, margins are small. The difference between a championship contender and a first-round exit can be surprisingly narrow. A few possessions. A few decisions. A few That's often all it takes. The Fever understand that reality better than anyone. They know the expectation. They know the being asked. Now they must provide answers. And the only place those answers can come from is the basketball court. Not in interviews. Not on social media. Not through passes. Through performance. Through execution. The encouraging reality is that Indiana possesses the talent necessary to change the narrative. One strong stretch can transform an entire season. One breakthrough performance can restore confidence. One winning streak can silence critics. The opportunity remains there. The challenge is seizing it. Conversations surrounding the Fever's offense will continue. Fans will continue debate. Analysts will continue questioning. Opponents will continue testing them. And every game renewed scrutiny. That's the price of expectation. That's the reality of being viewed as a contender. The spotlight. They earned the spotlight. Now they must prove they belong. Because somewhere beneath the inconsistency, somewhere beneath the criticism, somewhere beneath the disappointing offensive numbers, there remains a team capable of doing something special. The question is whether the team will finally reveal itself before the season runs out of time. And that's what makes the next chapter of the Indiana Fever story so fascinating. The potential is, the talent is still there. The opportunity is still there. Now all that's left is finding the offense everyone expected to see from the very beginning.